Paul Delaurier. How are you, brother?
I'm great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a while since we've been face to face, but I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story with the creative community.
Likewise, thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Let me give the audience a brief introduction here for you
All right.
so they kind of get a feel for who you are before we dive into the conversation. You are a strategic designer and creative technologist, specializing in art direction, branding, website design, and interaction design focused on meaningful user experience. Multidisciplinary design expertise in visual communication, prototyping, and solving business and brand challenges through thoughtful design solutions. You're a senior product designer for companies like NerdWallet, GTB Detroit, and Proficient Digital Labs. Your art direction and brand strategy voice is known for blending visual craftsmanship with strategic insight to elevate brand presence across digital platforms. And in your creative portfolio, you've created a body of work which is showcased on your personal website, representing collaborations with varied clients like Harley Davidson, the Black Keys, and Hickory.
That's it. That's me.
It's a whole lot more than what you and I worked on together back in the day.
Yeah, we worked on different stuff and even stuff that I'm probably even forgetting right now that I'm sure I'll probably it'll spark back up once we start talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's start off with my only scripted question, which it's the only one I ever have throughout these conversations. And
Okay.
that is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Paul?
Oh, that's awesome. Question. I was born here in Michigan. We're talking in Michigan today, and that's where I was born in the city of Detroit specifically. And I was a product of the late 70s and the early 80s. We grew up in Warren, Michigan, which is just a suburb outside of Detroit. And what was life like for me? Life was, I would say, pretty typical Midwest living up until maybe until I turned about eight, 8 or 9. And then at that point, my folks got divorced.
Okay.
And they've been, divorced to this day. They're each remarried, but having your parents split up at a pretty young age will have, I think, changes or at least informs the trajectory of your life, my life
Yeah.
included. So that was, in a nutshell, that's what happened with my folks when I was about 8 years old. My brother is about 6.5, 7 years older than me. So he was in the throes of, being a teenager when that happened.
Right.
So for him, it was pretty difficult too. It's difficult for me as well, but it's been so long now that I can't imagine my parents, how they would interact today were they still married to each other.
Okay.
Um, this life that I have now and the parents that I have now, both sets on both sides,
Yeah.
makes a whole lot of sense. Whereas, when I was 8 years old, it didn't feel like it made sense, but
Right
now it
on.
does.
Okay. Okay. What type of work did your parents do back then before you got divorced that you remember?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we grew up in Detroit. We're the Motor City. We make vehicles here. That's
Yeah.
pretty much our main import. With that said, my dad was always really interested in cars and sports. So he was an engineer when I was very young. He was a car mechanic
Okay.
and he self-taught, actually worked all the way up to becoming an engineer. And then he actually went back to school later on in life. But
Wow.
that's where he started out, was a mechanic and then became an engineer at one of the big three automotive companies. And my mom took care of us. And then she would also work administration types jobs.
Okay. Okay.
So those were the jobs that our folks were doing at home.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about your dad. My dad was a mechanic too
Oh
for
yeah.
for my younger years. And then about when I was 15, he ended up having to have lung surgery, and had to pivot because, they cracked his ribs open and cut those muscles underneath his arms. So he couldn't wrench on vehicles very
That
much
is
anymore.
that is dexterous.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that about your dad. Also, I know that you've got a history of either living in the South or you've got family in the South. I want to say,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, your grandfather's from Tennessee. Is that right?
Yes. Both sides of the family are from Tennessee. So even my parents, they were born in East Tennessee.
Did you
Um,
grow up down there? Or did you always live here?
I always lived here, but holidays, summers, anytime that there's a vacation or off of school, we would go back down there and
Yeah.
spend that time down there. So it was kind of a mixed upbringing from that perspective. I've got a older sister that is my dad's first child. She's lived there the whole time. So we would go back there to see her as well early on. So whenever we'd go there, my dad would have custody as soon as he got into the state. And so we would be able to, have her around for the time that we were there, which was,
Yeah.
it was kind of cool, because I didn't have that here growing up. But when I would go
Yeah.
there, I would always have an older sister. So it was an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic for
That
sure.
is kind of cool. Like a part time sibling
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
That is kind of interesting. So your folks are divorced as well, then? Is that right?
No, they were both married before. Then they got married and then had me and then had my younger sister 9 years later. So it's almost like there's 3 separate
Yeah.
in a sense. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, they were married 52 years. My dad passed away, at the end of 21,
Oh, I'm
um,
sorry.
right after the pandemic. It was additional lung issues.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with COVID, just years of working in, that mechanic environment with all the
Sure.
dust and brake dust, asbestos, all that early stuff that was not monitored back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. We're straight up building homes with asbestos all the way up until the 90s, probably.
yeah, exactly. How was school for you in elementary school? Were you one of the kids that wanted to sit towards the back of the class and not really be noticed or called on, or were you more interested in being up front and paying real close attention to what was going on?
I was neither of those kids. Now that I think about it, I definitely didn't want to be up front, because I didn't want to be picked on,
Right.
and I didn't feel like I had much to prove either, or I didn't want to prove myself. I also didn't want to hang out in the back.
All
Uh,
right.
for specific, like I can remember having the specific feeling of like, I don't want my teachers to think that I'm not paying attention or I'm not engaged. I was, I just didn't, I wasn't really excited about school. So I hung out in the middle
Right.
section.
Okay. Right on. And then how about any sports? Did you play any sports as a
I
kid?
did. Yeah. Soccer I played when I was really young, like through, I want to say the ages of 8 until maybe 13.
Okay.
And then at around 13, when I became a teenager, I'm sure this is true for a lot of kids who reach their teenage, you taste change,
Yeah.
you start developing, you get a little bit, your adultness comes out.
Yeah.
And with that said, I got way more interested in art and movies and music and art creation. And so, excuse me, the idea of becoming an athlete or being even interested in sports in general. Just really kind of fell off to the
Okay.
side. And my body was changing too, right? Like, again, you get to be a teenager, and I went from being a kind of I think a cute but round kid, like a sort of cute overweight kid, to
Yeah.
now just a kind of overweight young teenager. And so sports was out also for that reason. Like I didn't feel great about how I looked, so I didn't want to perform,
Right.
in crowds, things like that. Both of those confluences of my body changing, my tastes are also changing.
Uh,
So I moved away from sports and was really, super interested in drawing,
okay.
specifically like comic book characters around 12 and 13.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was about to ask, what was the thing that drew you to that artistic field?
Specifically, it was Mad magazine. Do you remember Mad?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So my brother, he's older than me, right? He's
Yeah.
about 7 years, and he would get them because he loved them. He thought they were funny. He'd read them to me. We look at them together, and then this thing. I don't know if you remember this, but the back inside cover of the Mad magazine always had this thing that you could fold into like a Z fold or a trifold, and it would be
Yeah.
full color. It would be the same sort of glossy paper as the cover. The covers were always super cool because they had that Alfred E. Newman character on the front, but then that inside back cover, it would be a large sort of landscape type of scene. It would sort of look abstract. And then there would be words on the bottom that would talk about the scene. And if
Yeah.
you were to fold those together, like in a Z fold, it would create an entirely new image, like a face. Take the images on the side before they were folded, and once you fold them all, you get like another new image. And then even the words would line up too. So it would create an entirely new different story. That whole thing blew my mind. Right. Like
Yeah.
just the fact that there could be this sort of cool artwork on the back, and then once you manipulate it, it creates an entirely new piece of artwork and then an entirely new story too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just like opened my whole brain up, and then I think that's what even got me interested in graphic design as opposed to just strictly fine arts. So
Right.
Mad Magazine was a huge portal into the arts for me.
Right. Did did grandparents or anybody else in the family have any creative elements to them?
No, which is
No.
really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt pretty alone in that sense. Like I can't really. People are really supportive. My parents, in particular, very supportive, encouraging,
Yeah.
but also, because there was nobody else in my immediate family who was into art or made their own art. I had to seek out friends who were interested in that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. We're just learning from, this was even obviously pre-internet, so learning from books or like textbooks, encyclopedias, stuff like that. Yeah, there wasn't anybody else in my family though who's really interested in artwork.
Right on. Right on. Did you said you got into some music as well around that time?
Yeah,
Was your brother into music at all?
yes,
Okay.
huge. I'm forever grateful for having an older brother for very many reasons, a lot of reasons. But I think for a lot of teens, a lot of male teens, I think it's super important to have like a guy or a person that will show you cool shit. And that was totally my brother
Nice.
because he was so much older than me, not so much, but like when you're 12 and your brother's 17, that's quite an age difference. You can consume a lot of cool stuff at that age when you're probably not supposed to be consuming it because you're so young. But I'm super
Right.
thankful. Like I learned hip hop by hanging out with my brother. I learned metal by hanging out with my brother, punk rock, and then
Yeah,
all of the stuff that goes along with all, all three of those genres.
for sure. For
So yeah,
sure.
he was a big influence on me in terms of music and friends and stuff like that.
Right on. Once you got into high school, did you start to seek out art classes and stuff like that even more so?
Yeah, for sure. Even before high school, like if I think back to grade school and middle school, we had middle school back then, which was like seventh,
Eighth and
eighth,
ninth?
seventh, eighth, and ninth. Yeah, that was in one school district. Now that I think about it, when I moved to this system that I went through high school, it was 9th through 10th. Either way, even before high school, I remember wanting to take art classes or trying to be around other kids who were interested in art, making things. And then, yeah, specifically in high school, your first 2 years, you have a lot of prerequisites and stuff that you kind of have to take. But yeah, I can remember my 11th and 12th grade was all of the art classes that I could like legally take. I was taking them. Yeah, whatever other requirements that I had to do. I was always trying to be in art classes or photography classes. I even took pottery classes, which I was not good at, but I was just interested in trying new things and making stuff.
Right, for sure. For sure. Did you do any music, like band or anything like that?
Yes, I was in a bunch of failed bands. One of them pretty in particular with our mutual friend Dennis. We had our own band, which really was just kind of to amuse each other, but it was super fun. And we'd record music again, just to sort of like just to make a tape and then create the album artwork
Okay.
and have a thing that we
Yeah.
could say that this was ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, did all that stuff. I learned how to play guitar. I used to play, I took lessons when I was really young. And then in those lessons, I was just asking the guy to teach me how to play Metallica songs. So I ended up just like learning how to read music in tablature and then learning songs that way and
Okay.
just kind of experimenting with guitar. And then, like I said, being in failed bands that, didn't really go anywhere, but were super important in terms of entertaining ourselves and just kind of
Yeah.
creating fun and bad music.
Right, right. That's interesting that you were able to um, grab on to reading the music as well. A lot of creatives that I've known that are musicians or have dabbled in music, they don't always have the ability to read the music. They can usually play by ear or figure it out by chords and different things like that. But reading it a lot of times, that's a different level of skill set.
To this day, I don't read music anymore, but I remember learning. I remember like reading textbooks about notes and then recognizing what those notes look like on the page, and I would piece together that these notes translate to this chord on a guitar. But then I learned it was so much easier to maybe listen to a song or like read tablature for guitar books and stuff like that, and I could figure out how to play tunes that way. But yeah, that's a skill that I didn't cultivate a whole lot. But yeah, I remember trying to learn that at a pretty young age, though.
Right on. At what age do you and Dennis cross paths?
I was in ninth grade. He was in 10th grade,
Okay.
and so high school. He graduated 1 year before I did, and I remember the exact time I ever saw him. Has he told you this story? I can
I
retell the story.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I don't think we ever got into it or I ever heard it.
So the very first time that I met him was in our gym class, and it was like a free gym
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
It's like unstructured play. And he comes up to me, being the entrepreneur that he always is and was.
Yeah.
And he tried to sell me a water purifier because he had, I think he was working with a family member who maybe was trying to sell these. Maybe they had like an affiliate offer going on
Yeah.
or something like that. So he targets who he probably thinks is a pretty easy sell in me. And by the way, I'm in ninth grade, he's in 10th grade. Neither of us really have any money. But anyways, he tries to sell me a water purifier. And the way that he tries to sell me is he says, you can key in this thing and the filtration system is so good that water will come out and then you can drink that water.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how he tried to sell me. And I ignored him. And I don't remember much else about that interaction. And then I also don't remember seeing him for a number of months after that. There was that gym class, and let's say that was in the beginning part of the school year, and then maybe after a couple of semesters, say mid part of the school year, I remember walking into my photography class for the first time. It was like class number 1 for me. And I walk through the door and I look in the classroom just to see if I know anybody, if I want to sit with anybody. And guess who is sitting at a 2-top table by himself, makes direct eye contact with me, waves his hand up in the air and sort of like,
Yeah.
bringing me over. And that's how Dennis and I actually met, is in that photography class. I sat next to him and what do? We started talking about music and movies and artwork. And we became instant friends, like that scene in Step Brothers.
Yeah.
Where they have a 2-second conversation and then they both realize we become best friends.
Yeah.
We didn't actually say that out loud, but thinking back, that's probably how it actually happened. We just had so much in common back then that
Yeah.
we became friends.
Yeah. That's very cool. Like, I never heard that story. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Now, from that perspective as well, I also know both of your personalities type to an extent.
Yeah.
And it's pretty extreme in terms of what Dennis's personality, especially from our conversations that him and I have had at that point in time in life.
Yeah.
I imagine I've always known you as more reserved, a lot quieter, more of a thinker than an interactor.
Yeah.
But at that time, was it a scenario of, okay, he's more outgoing, I can hang around him, I don't have to talk, I don't have to do this or do that? Was it a scenario where you were able to navigate a school a little bit more easier with someone like that as a friend?
That's a good question. First of all, you're absolutely right. Our personalities couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
He's a type A personality, very outgoing. I'm just the opposite. But if I think about a lot of the relationships that I have in my life, even if I think about my brother as well, my brother's just the opposite of me, but he and I get along together really well. And I think it's that I like people who are different than me. Plus, I like people who are not normal, like who are a little bit like
On the edge?
like interesting, like have a perspective, and they're not allowed or they're not afraid to talk about it or to really share their feelings, to have like real conversations. Those are the types of people that I'm drawn to, Dennis included.
Yeah.
And probably I wasn't able to realize that or really articulate that at a young age, but I have to assume that there was something inside of me that felt that and drew me to him. And if I think about a lot of my friends, they're kind of like that. I'm to most of my friends, I am the straight guy, like you said. Like I'm a little bit more reserved
Yeah.
and stoic and all of that stuff. And
Right.
maybe that's why I seek out those relationships, because I haven't cultivated that personality of my own. So I appreciate it in other people, or I like being around it.
Yeah. It's definitely always interesting when you have people that are like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about something getting boring, or most of the time conversation is never boring. Um,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't tell you the content of some of the first conversations that Dennis and I had. I mean, it's just not appropriate, especially since we're all adults now. But yeah, like I like the absurd. I like talking about that stuff and thinking about that kind of stuff.
yeah. As you're moving through high school and you're getting closer towards that end, Dennis is going to go off a bit earlier than you are.
Mm.
Are you starting to think of, all right, what am I going to do after school? Am I going to go into photography, be a photographer? Or am I going to go into art? What are your thoughts about what you're going to do after you get out of school?
I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a graphic artist. I was pretty focused on going to school, like continuing my education and making cool stuff on computers, because at that time, computer, this was sort of like in I wouldn't call it the golden age, but the first time a Macintosh computer was going to be used for like creative work. Like
Yeah.
really, really that blew my parents gave me a Macintosh just out of high school. And I got, access to all the Adobe applications like Photoshop and
Yeah.
Illustrator. And so again, this blew my mind open again, because I was getting way more interested in commercial work
Yeah.
and creating like graphic design, but like, specifically like concert posters
Yeah.
or like literature or, magazines or something like that, like something that I can actually make and then sort of hold in my hand. Like, I just got really interested in all of that stuff. So I knew even in like my senior year of high school, I was doing like fine arts stuff, and I was on what was called the National Arts Honor Society. But
Okay.
I was kind of removed from like wanting to do fine arts. Like I knew a lot of kids that were going to go to college and like pursue a fine arts degree.
Right.
But I became really interested in commercial artwork, and I was trying to like, I wanted like a career. I
Mhm.
wanted to have some sort of like, I wanted to use this art thing to actually create a job. And I thought the only viable solution was to be a graphic artist, because I knew that that's a skill somebody would hire me for. So
Right.
I was pretty aware of that at I guess a relatively young age.
Gotcha.
And
And
that was sorry to interrupt you, but I was just thinking that was kind of the same time that Dennis and I started working together, and we created that little agency that we had, like the first version of that.
yeah, was it called Eclipse from the start?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the very first name, which we pretty quickly changed, but the very first name was Eclipse Layout Services.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody, maybe it was a client, or maybe it was somebody else that gave us the feedback that like, oh, you kind of sound like a mortuary, like a layout service. That does not sound like you're a couple of graphic designers. So we
Right.
just shortened it to Eclipse after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember around that time, I was doing the graphic design stuff myself, but I was doing a lot of the hand drawn layout and
Yeah.
how everything that was pre computer. And I was taking all my client work into speedy printing there on CAS, um,
Yeah.
to Nick and George Calvet.
Oh man. Oh my God. I haven't thought about. those names and years. I know exactly who you're talking. Yeah, because right, because we started. I want to say that was the impetus for how we all started working together, right?
It was, absolutely was. Because at
Yeah,
that point too, because I was taking them the stuff, and of course, as I'm drawing things out and laying it out by hand and taking it to them, they're like, "Hey, this is causing us a lot of extra work. So what I would like for you to do is go meet these guys. They do most of our layout stuff anyways. So go over, meet with them, show them what you got. They can do the stuff, pre-prep stuff of
that's
what
great.
we need, and it can be an easier, smoother process. And so
Now remembering all of this. Yeah.
yeah, that was the instance of where I'm like, okay, they gave me a phone number to the office, which was in Dennis's condo. And
Okay, so when we met you, it was the condo. Do you ever remember going to like a basement office in Mount Clemens? Does that ring a
no,
bell? Okay,
no,
so this was actually that. Okay.
yeah. All right, so let's pick up at the basement office about that, how that started out.
Yeah. So when we first started, it was in like our business was in the basement of my parents' home that I grew up in like post high school. And we did the whole nine. Like we made a brochure for ourselves. We took headshots. We wore suits. We would to try to get business. We would actually go into small businesses like nail salons or like pager stores. 'Cause
Yeah,
this was even like pre cell phone, and we pitch ourselves. Like literally walk up to people who was like standing behind a cash register or a table, introduce ourselves, tell them that we can do their advertising and marketing, and leave behind a business card. And
yeah,
so that was like our client acquisition model. And then so we got a couple of clients, and then we got this steady client, and it was this automotive publication, and that was like reoccurring revenue. We had this thing that we would do every Wednesday, and it would give us X amount of dollars a week. So now we're like, man, this is like a business here.
yeah,
This person's revenue was like 80% of our business, but it gave us gave Dennis the confidence to like rent an office and like kind of turn this into like I guess a proper studio. So found this space in the basement of an insurance office, like a car insurance office. That was the top floor,
yeah,
and we shared this basement space with another studio that Dennis was friends with from like a job that he had held, like another newspaper publication, sort of a small newspaper publication. So those guys had in one room really, and then we had another room
okay,
in the back, and we would toss work back and forth to each other. Like sometimes they would hire us to do things that they couldn't do, and vice versa. But that was the first office that we had, which was in the basement of that insurance company um,
yeah,
in Mount Clemens. And then, yeah, spaces changed a couple of different times, but I guess when we first met you and started working with you, that's when he moved the office into the condo that he lived in. So this
yeah,
room was upstairs, and our office, basically the living room, became
yeah,
our office at that point. So
yeah,
now I'm super curious to think like the guys at Speedy Printing, they give you our contact information. They say, go see these guys. You
yeah.
come over. Do you remember what you saw when you first met us? Or like what? Because that home, he was there for a really long time, living and working in there. And
Yeah.
even I lived there at one point, but I don't recall like what year you came in, or like even what state that office was in at that time. So do you remember what you
Yeah.
saw when you first walked in?
When I first walked in,
Hey.
the kitchen was right off to the right,
Yeah.
and to the left of the kitchen was the upstairs.
Yeah.
And so you walk in, go down this small hallway that leads into the living room area, which is where the office was set up.
Yeah.
And Dennis had his desk pretty much right in the sight line of the door. So I walk up to the door, knock on the door. It was open, just the screen door was closed, and he just waved me in. He's like, "Come on in."
Just a stranger.
Yeah.
Come on in. Come on in, friend.
And I'm like, "Hey, Nick and George from Speedy sent me over here. I'm Rich." He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, come on in." And so I walk in, and I think he even had a poster of the Eclipse Productions up on the wall next to
Sure,
his
yeah.
desk there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I walk in, and then I'm like, "Oh wow, there's another person in here." And then I see you over on the right side of the room because you had your desk was butted up against, if I believe, it was the kitchen wall
Yep.
where it separated the two.
Yep. That's probably right.
And then I just sat down and started talking to both of you about what I had going on, what I was trying to do with them, and that kicked everything off.
That was it.
Yeah.
Did I even, when you walked in, did I even turn around? Did I like,
You acknowledged that I was there, yes, but you didn't turn and
sure,
completely listen to the conversation. You were busy
sure,
working.
sure. Yeah, I was probably listening to everything, but being sneaky. Like not like pretending like I wasn't listening, but probably listening. I remember doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's the first time, and then that kicked off. I don't know how many years did we work together? Many, right?
Yeah, many. It was always a back and forth scenario of either something I'm doing or something that I was involved with. Because at that time too, I was working at Tubby's, and so I was doing things there, managing the store, but I was also trying to do my own side stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had a clothing company at that time where I was trying to produce clothes. So I get my hang tags and stuff printed with Nick and George at Speedy, and then
Yeah.
come over and bring different things to you guys in terms of stuff I need laid out to be able to go back to them and get it printed out.
Yep.
Not probably, I would say not to. At some point in time, I remember there was a period where we didn't interact much, and that was probably around the time that I attempted suicide in
Yeah.
those days.
I I didn't know that about you. I don't think I've known about that until just now. I didn't know that you went
Oh,
through that. I'm really sorry.
oh wow, okay. Yeah, because what happened was working at Tubby's, realizing working there, I was not going to be able to move up because my intention was I wanted to move into the advertising department at the main corporate
Oh,
offices.
like, okay, got it.
And I was at the store that I was at that time the CEO's personal store. So
Oh, interesting.
he had his own store, and then he was also the CEO of the company at the time.
Yeah.
And I'd had multiple conversations saying, "Hey, I'm going to school in Florida, trying to study graphic design. I want to go into advertising and, move up into the office." And I presented my portfolio like 3 different times throughout the time I was at school, which was only 2 2 years plus an additional semester after sitting out. And so that wasn't enough of portfolio visuals to be able to present to somebody for a pitch into job application or opportunity. And so there just wasn't enough there in hindsight that they could see how it would translate for me moving into advertising.
So
So
you pitched your portfolio to the CEO? Is that who you're talking about?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And they just didn't see it.
no, didn't see it.
Okay.
So it was a whole scenario of, all right, this isn't going to happen. And then two, they were having me train franchisees people that were going to have their own stores. They would have to come
Okay.
to my store. I would train them. And then I would go to their store for like the first week of their opening and help them get their employees going, that kind of stuff. And my manager, my district manager at that time, was engaged to the daughter of the CEO. So he was about to,
Okay.
get tied into the family that way. And the
Okay.
conversation between him and I about, all right, where's this in-store opportunity going to go? I'm already a manager. I'm training franchisees. Like at some point, I need to level up in terms of pay.
Yeah.
And he came back and said, you're capped out at your pay level. So I wasn't even going to be able to get more money for training these people that would go on and have their own stores.
Oh, so
So
they gave you this responsibility, but it didn't really come with any monetary gain.
no, not at all. And
Oh,
so the whole situation was it was starting to be crushing to
yeah.
me, as a creative, thinking about future opportunities, that kind of stuff. And the clothing company wasn't taking off like I had anticipated. One of my first gigs with the clothing was an opportunity to sell at Lollapalooza at Pine Knob. And for the audience, Pine Knob is kind of like one of our local music venues where everybody comes through when they come into Michigan.
That's right. Yeah, I guess if you don't live around here, my knob doesn't make any sense, but you're absolutely right. So exactly what it is.
Yeah. And so I was able to set up at the Lollapalooza. A buddy of mine was working as an event coordinator there. And so he had got me the opportunity to set up, had me set up right at the front of the gate where everybody
Right.
was going to come in, right by the ticket boxes. Good spot, prime real estate, everything. Then there wasn't anybody else set up in that area either. Everybody was more towards the concourse, going towards the seating area. And I had given, right before everything got moving, after I got set up, I had taken some stuff over to Robert Stansler. I don't know if you remember that name at all.
Mr. Made in Detroit.
Yes. He was the original owner of Made
Yeah.
in Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had taken some of my designs, some t-shirts and hats over to him and said, hey, designer to designer, just wanted you to have some of my stuff set up over here. And that was probably the biggest mistake that I made of that entire day.
Really?
Yes.
I wouldn't think that would be a mistake because it's kind of a nice gesture. Like you just said, from one person that's doing the same thing, like a respect type of thing, right?
Yeah. That's how I thought of it as well, right?
Sure.
And my stuff was all embroidered. Even my t-shirts were embroidered. T-shirts were embroidered, my hats were embroidered. I didn't have anything that was silk screened really.
Yeah.
And not long after that, the tour managers for Lollapalooza came over to my table and they said, hey, we're going to have to ask you to close down. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Number one, who are you? First off, because my buddy's the one who got me set up. So I'm not talking with him. I don't know who the tour people are.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we're the management for the tour. We've got all these other venues, our vendors rather, that are set up. And we have a kind of an exclusive arrangement with one of our vendors that we wouldn't let anybody else sell t-shirts and hats and stuff other than, just the tour merch. And I'm like, well, who is this? And they're like, well, it's made in Detroit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
my stuff's not even like his stuff. Like my stuff is more, at that time I was designing what in my head was more environmentally friendly type stuff. So my designs were based around unity and respecting the earth and different things like
Yeah.
that. And that was all automotive inspired, right?
Yes.
And so I was like, it's not even the same stuff. I'm not competing with his target market. They're like, yeah, but we already have this agreement set up. We're going to have to ask you to close down. And I'm like, well, can you get my buddy Derek on the phone? Can you get him over here on the walkie talkie? Get him so we can have a conversation with him because he's the one who said I could set up. He comes over and he's trying to talk to him and he starts arguing with him. And ultimately, it's like, they were like, look, guy, this is our tour. You're just the house support here at the venue. And so we have this huge contract with your bosses and we need him to close down. And so Derek comes back over. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, dude, but we got to have you close down because they're just going to push their authority and we're not going to get anywhere. And it'll end up causing bigger problems.
Yeah.
And out of credit to them, they gave me an all access pass. And they're like, hey, you don't have to leave this venue or anything like that. You can hang out, enjoy the shows, the concert, all the different artists. This will get you anywhere you need to go. We just can't have you selling. So they did give me something for making me close down. But
but you were there to sell your merch and get your brand out into the public.
Yeah.
Sure. So like seeing the show was probably nice of them, but you were there for business,
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that it's because the other guy said something, right? Like
Yes.
You showed, so he realized that you were there. He maybe made a stink about it. That's how the story goes.
Yep. Just for simple fact, if he's like, all right, here's another designer who's set up, it's going to be money coming out of my pocket. So
yeah,
can't have it. And for me, it was like, wait a second, I just spent all this money in anticipation of making sales here.
Yeah.
So that on top of the situation I'm experiencing at work, right? My day job, it's like a crushing blow. Like I'm defeated. I have no backup plan for selling this product outside of that day at Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
And so the week and week and a half after that was just soul crushing to the point where ultimately I just attempted suicide because I didn't have any idea of how I was going to get out from underneath this weighted debt that I had created here. Ended up spending 6 weeks in the hospital, inpatient, and then did 6 weeks outpatient after that. And so, yeah, that was my experience from that perspective.
Man, I'm sorry. I didn't know that was going on. I didn't know that you went through that. Thanks for sharing that story with me. I'm sorry you went through that. Ultimately, do you feel that like the events that led up to that are not ideal? It's not what you wanted, but there's like, if I can put this in perspective of like my life, like things have happened, horrible things have happened in my life, but I've used that as, a method to pivot or maybe think differently about things.
Yeah.
And use that as a strength mechanism. How do you feel about that situation today and your mental state now? Do you feel like it's been informed by that part of your life? Do you feel, I don't want to put words here about, but how does that make you? Does it make you feel?
It doesn't, it started the journey of trying to figure out, okay, why is my brain not able to solve a problem? Number one, it's like, why can't I think my way out of this? Because at that point, I was big. I had pretty much the ability to figure out stuff, reverse engineer it, break it down, and then figure out how to best put it back together. This was one thing that I couldn't figure out. So from that perspective, to answer the question, it definitely informed me of trying to learn how to think of things in a different way. But from the mental state, like after that, even when I met you guys, like that had taken place. And I still had it in my head that at some point I'm just getting out of this world. Like it wasn't a thought process of I need to heal. It was still it was still a thought process of, I'm creative. I know I can do these things to potentially make some money. So let me try and figure out how to continue to do this. But at whatever point in time, if these things don't ever work out, then I'm going to check out again, or at least try to.
Right. So you had one foot in this world and one foot in the afterlife. Like
Yeah,
you were not convinced that this world was right for you yet.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Wow. And this was all sort of, you were experiencing this, you were sort of wrestling with all of this stuff. But what I assume was probably the bulk of the relationship that I had with you at that time, but I just
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah. It was 100%. 100%. Because I didn't even get to a place of, even though I was going to therapy, because I had started prior to the attempt going to therapy. And fortunately, the psychiatrist that I had, she was a resident at the hospital, St. John's on Ross in
Okay.
Detroit. She was a resident there,
Okay.
and then had her private practice as well. So when that took place, my parents were able to just call her up, and she's like, okay, take him here. I will meet you guys there, and we'll get everything situated and address the scenario. So that was a bonus from that perspective.
Yeah.
But thereafter, still continuing, trying to do therapy and all that kind of stuff over the years, didn't really get to a place of truly tapping into some healing work until probably 2017, when I got in contact with an intuitive healer in St. Augustine, Florida. Her name's Marilyn Edwards.
Yeah.
And I started working with her in exchange for doing graphic design and branding and stuff like that. And we, still do that stuff for each other ever since.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh,
it's been a
that's
journey.
that's kind of cool. And even more so, like you can use your skills and your experience to make relationships uh,
Yeah.
with other folks, like with Marilyn here doing design work for therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you still see Marilyn to this day?
I see her online and we converse over phone and stuff. I've met her one time, and that was 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
I threw up my hands thinking, because of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, everybody was, struggling to find work and everything, clients. I was like, I'm just going to go work for somebody else. And I had some interviews set up in Florida. So I traveled down there to the Tampa, Clearwater area, did these interviews. Again, nothing panned out. They were either looking for three people, the work of three people for this one position.
Oh, yeah.
One company specifically, it was for promotional products. And, we know promotional products. That's something that's been a part of our journeys as well.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know CAD, knew how to do everything else and have all this experience, even the jewelry experience now behind me, creating jewelry.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I didn't know how to do CAD, that eliminated me from the pool of candidates for this position at a promotional products company. And I was like, I just can't win for losing here.
So that
I had
graphic design,
Yeah.
illustration, and computer CAD as well.
Yes.
That's a lot. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah. And, they only want to pay one wage, one salary for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of
Also
course.
to those people.
Of course, yeah.
It ultimately ended up that I was just going to have to turn around and come back to Michigan. But I was like, I'm on the way to here in Florida. She's in St. Augustine. I'm like, there's no way after this amount of time working with her that I cannot see her face to face before I go back to Michigan. So I drove
Sure.
up and over across the state, met her face to face, and it was just like what we do when we're on a Zoom call or just that phone call. It wasn't really any different. So I was able to
Yeah.
do that, but yeah, took a
That's
while
great.
to get there.
And you still have a relationship with her
Yep,
though? Like,
yep, still work with her.
that's
At
great.
different point, things will come up that I'm not even aware of why it's coming up. Something will come up and she's like, "All right, let's get on a call, talk about it and work through it."
Oh yeah. Like feelings, emotions,
Yep,
thoughts,
yep,
stuff like that. Oh, so she's available
yeah,
to talk about that. Oh man, that's great. That's invaluable to have somebody like that.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But back to that scenario of meeting you guys, it was in my head of like, all right, at least these guys know more than I do when it comes to the computer stuff. So let me, try to work with them as much as possible. And then at some point in time, conversation came up about Dennis's band. And then he knew from that experience because when I came out of the hospital, I had to find another job. So I went out to Pontiac and got a job at Industry Nightclub, if you remember Industry
Oh,
back then.
oh yeah, yeah, of course. Like seminal nightclub,
Yeah.
like 90s, early aughts.
Yep. And so I started working the door there and then saw the opportunity to make event posters and stuff for them, business
Mhm.
cards. And then
That's
ultimately
right.
you guys helped lay that stuff out.
That's right. Yeah, I can recall now that you say that doing business cards for industry and like I want to say like shirt graphics, maybe
Yeah.
for like employees,
Yep.
maybe security folks too. Yeah, I can remember. I can remember all that stuff now. Man, this is going back.
Yeah. And around that time too is when I was introduced by some buddies of mine who had another band called 40 Ounce for 4OD. The D standard for
I
it's
remember
short
this.
for Richard.
I remember going to what was the name of that concert venue in Mount Clemens? The big one.
The Hayloft,
No, it was like a
Emerald.
small theater, Emerald. There you go. I remember myself, you, maybe some other people. I remember going to see them perform there with House of Killers. That sound right?
Yeah,
Anyways, there was the like they were on the bill that night. I remember seeing a couple different bands that I really liked them at the time.
yeah, so
Yeah.
those guys introduced me to Kid Rock, and so
Yeah.
at that point, he had been dropped from 2 labels, and he was just doing everything independently, and when Dennis found out that I was in connection with him, he's like, "Hey, we've got this band. What do you think are some possibilities?" And I'm like, "Well, let's see what happens." And then that just kind of turned into, at some point, me trying to help Dennis with the torsion,
Yeah.
try trying to get them into venues. So it was also a circle of seeing opportunity for design work,
Yeah.
bringing sharing it with you guys, and then also the music scene scenarios, trying to just meld everything together. But
Yeah.
all the while too, in my head, I'm still dealing with that depression, that all of that stuff, and at that point, I didn't have anxiety like I've had later on in life, because like you said, I had a foot in one world and one in the other, so it
Yeah.
didn't matter to me. I was free willy whatever. Like,
Yeah.
if it killed me, alright, cool, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Did you feel like you didn't have anything to lose
Yeah,
anyway?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a bit twisted on my part because I didn't have any consideration at that point in time for my family. what it would do to my family, what it had
Yeah.
potentially done to my family. Like, it was not registering in my head because I was so tied up of trying to get out of this internal pain that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
Um, and at that point in time too, was kind of when I got a little bit of the information from Dennis about his father.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where that connection for him and I kind of started to be a little bit tighter in a sense because of those experiences. And for those that are listening, Dennis's episode is one of the earlier episodes of season one, where we dive deep into that whole storyline of Dennis's father committing suicide and how he dealt with that thereafter. Which, let's bring that back to working with Dennis and
Okay.
being in that environment as a creative and having these opportunities as you guys had as a business. How was that situation for you in terms of realizing at a certain point things are starting to shift and change and you're having your own ideas of what you want to be a part of, what you don't want to be a part of?
Yeah. That time was just chaos for,
Exactly. That's why I'm there.
for me. Yeah. As you can imagine. So yeah, you know a little bit about me and my personality, Dennis, and like, even if I think about all of the people that we were like, all of the people in our orbit back then,
Yeah.
it was all very chaotic. Living in that home, working together,
Yeah.
the different bands and people in bands, and then all of those people that sort of come along with that. Plus, I'm at one point living there, and
Yeah.
then also working there, and then I'm also in college too, and
Yeah.
and that is that's a sort of like separate side from me. Like, it was kind of this was like during that time, like, do it yourself culture was like super popular and important. So like the idea of me having my own thoughts and my own goals and like wanting to educate myself is like not very cool. So I kept like that part of my life separate.
Yeah.
And then I can remember just like incidentally, I remember being like hung up on a girl and like having been broken up with. And I'm like, late teens, early 20s, like it's this confluence of shit, like trying to be an adult, try to do adult things, but then like I'm also a kid
Yeah.
and I'm also really good friends with this person, but we're working together and there's conflicts that inherently happen there. It's like, when do you turn the friendship off and turn the business partner side on?
Right.
And yes, so like, how do I navigate through all of this stuff? And the answer is not good. And everybody, like it just was not, it was not easy. And in hindsight, probably not good. But much like I was saying earlier, there's like horrible experiences that you go through, that I go through, everybody goes through. I can use that as a, mechanism to like learn from, or learn what not to do or how not to interact with people, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But all of that said, I certainly wouldn't want to relive that time. This time seems much more optimal
Yeah.
at this
Totally.
point.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. Y- As I remember back as well, during that time, Dennis was starting to work with some other bands. And I
Yeah.
believe that's when you guys decided that you were going to not be partners any longer. You were going to go ahead and go off and do your own thing. He was going to be able to go ahead and continue doing his thing. And also, too, around that time was where I was starting to see some of the things that were taking place in his life that were destructive, for the easiest way to explain it, because of stuff that he was dealing with mentally.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, if I stay around this too much longer, there's a potential for me to end up getting locked up. And that was a fear because I had just come out of the hospital. And when you go into the hospital, especially for mental health issues and or suicide attempt or something like that, it's presented to you that this is a 72-hour hold. But what they don't say is that after those 72 hours, you're not guaranteed to be able to go home
Oh,
because
okay.
at that point, your doctor is in control.
Oh,
And
I
if
see.
and if you don't, if you're not up to par to be able to go back out into the world and into society, your doctor's not going to allow that. And my doctor did not.
Oh,
So I was literally locked in. So in my brain, once I was able to get out, get through the day program, and then back into regular life, I was like, all right, no matter what I'm doing, there's no way I'm getting locked up in any kind of situation where I can't exit and get out of. So I'm thinking, all right, some of the stuff that Dennis is doing, because it's a party life for him at that point. And
mhm.
especially too when you're around bands, local bands, big bands, whatever. That's just part of the process of that world. And
For
so
sure.
Dennis was fully bought in on it. And I'm seeing it, and I wasn't really too much into that side of things at that point in time, or really ever. I just never was a big drinker or definitely wasn't into drugs or anything like that.
Yeah.
And Dennis walked down that road a little bit farther than probably most people that we were around at that point in time. And so it was
Yeah.
always in my head of like, I've got to start to distance myself slightly because I don't want to get out with him and get the cops called on us and end up going to jail. So I was starting to wean myself out of that scenario also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was no love loss scenario. It was just, I can't afford to have an opportunity arise where I'm going to get locked up. So it was a preservation scenario of not getting put into a confined situation again.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I know exactly what you were going through because I too had to distance myself. Yeah, we had stopped working together. I moved out of the condo. I had my own goals. I had my own life. I wanted to
Yeah.
explore the things that I was interested in, and yeah, kind of move away from that previous existence and those people and all the kind of feeling bad and baggage that went along with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
At that point too, I believe this is the time when you kind of, was it your dad's house that you moved back into?
Yeah.
Started?
Yeah. I was going to, I was going to buy a new apartment, but it wasn't ready. So there was a period of time where I moved in with my dad. And that was when you and I started doing a little bit of work
Yeah.
together. Yeah. I remember you coming over and we'd sit, jam on some of your illustration stuff that had to get like print ready.
Yes. Yeah. That's when I was doing more, started back doing the t-shirts and stuff with the
Yep.
Motor City clothing line.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that.
And at that point, what does your thought process look like in terms of, all right, I'm going to try and make this on my own, and these are what my potential goals are? Or are you still trying to figure it out at that point as well?
what was I like? What was my kind of overall
Yeah. What was your
sense of
overall?
like my life?
Yeah.
So I moved out there. It was with my dad. I think I had at that point I had got a pretty steady job. I had saved up enough money to buy an apartment, but like it wasn't it wasn't ready. There was still sort of like this building was being rehabilitated, and they weren't done rehabilitating the building. And this was downtown. This was in Detroit. Dad
Okay.
lived all the way up in Sterling Heights, but I had like I'd kind of like made that transition, so to speak, already from like living this uh, kind of like chaotic, a little bit bohemian life. I'd gone through schools. On the other side of that, I had, like I said, found a pretty steady job and all of that stuff. So I felt like I was already, on my way, so to
Yeah.
speak, or like I had some things going for myself. And really, that all goes back to me. If I think about like what I got interested in art in the first place and design in the first place was like making commercial things, like being valuable to other people or like being able to create something and sell something. And so I was always interested in like commerce and business making and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so when so at that point in my life, this is before I'd moved to that apartment that I was talking about. I was living with my dad. I already had like a steady job, so I felt like, oh man, I'm like becoming like an adult here or something.
Yeah.
I feel like things are kind of gelling. I'm doing work. I'm doing work that I'm proud of, and I'm employed and all of that stuff. So it felt different, but pretty good.
Okay. And at that point as well, when you get this new opportunity, and as you're saying, and I'm starting to remember, yeah, you moved downtown Detroit,
Yep.
started working in that area too, right?
Yeah, I did. This was probably back in 2008 that I'm thinking about it. And yeah, I for a period there, I lived downtown and I worked at a small agency down there too. So for me, it was like it was really cool. It was the life that I had kind of wanted because I don't like driving. I don't like cars. It's very ironic that we live where we live, but I'm not a big car person. And I remember being so happy that I could either walk or bike to where I worked at the time from the place that I lived.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was super, super cool. I thought it was really cool.
Right. Once you got into that new job and that experience and were able to realize, okay, I don't have to go out and really chase clients anymore. I've got something that's stable and I don't have to stress about those types of things as independent creatives do most of the time. What did that do for you in terms of, all right, now I can breathe a little bit. Let me start moving in this type of direction. And what was that direction?
You can, I can breathe, but that doesn't mean that I don't have imposter syndrome. That doesn't
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
that doesn't mean that I don't think my work sucks or, that I'm not as talented as some of these people that are like working at bigger agencies than I am. At the time I was working at a pretty small boutique type of agency. We had really specific clients, really small clients. And yeah, so it's sort of like I exchanged one set of problems for maybe a new set
Okay.
of, of problems. Or you can, frame it as an opportunity, but not to say that while I was going through it at the time, I certainly did feel like I had anxiety in terms of my capabilities or my talent, stuff like
Okay.
that. I don't know if that ever faded. As I get older, as I become more experienced, I feel like you do things enough, then it's like, it's not your first rodeo anymore. You
Right.
get a little bit more confident. But I think the work of you make things and you put those things out in the world and people expect if you expect people to pay for them or buy them from you, inherently, I'm going to feel, I can't speak for everybody, I'm going to feel as if it's not good enough.
For sure. I totally get
So,
it.
for as confident as, you might be with your abilities or skills, there's always that small piece. It's like, this sucks.
Yeah, for sure. If you look back through the storyline, as we've talked about it today, if you look back to that point, that 8-year-old boy who saw his parents starting to split up, and I know this was a scenario that ran through Dennis's head with the conversation that I had with him, is there's a little bit of, am I the reason why this is taking place? Potentially.
The separation.
Yeah. Did you feel any of that? And did that create any of that quote unquote imposter syndrome origin?
No, first, I never felt like their separation had anything to do with me.
Okay.
And I know that from a feeling standpoint. And then when I think about logistically what happened, there's a couple of things that were probably going on for my parents. They were super young when
All right.
they got married. They were 19 and 20.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
yeah. So they didn't even know themselves
Right.
at that point. Even as a man, your amygdala isn't even fully formed until you're 25. So you don't have a sense of who you are, how you fit in the world. So they were really young. So that has nothing to do with me. I think what I did get out of all of that, though, is this sense of a fractured family. So what I think is sacred is not true.
Right.
The first 8 years of my life, I'm thinking that this is my home. These are my people. My life is always going to be like this. So I got this. What I got was what I think is true isn't necessarily true, and
Right.
nothing necessarily lasts forever either. So
Yeah.
if anything, things got a little less precious, but that also in turn put pressure on me to what's the word, like warm well or be successful
Yeah. Okay.
in my own life, because I got the feeling that I had to be self sufficient,
Efficient. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I got anything from that, it wasn't guilt about them splitting up or thinking that it was my fault. If I got anything, it was this sort of pressure of doing something
Right.
with myself, with my life,
Okay.
and then the fear associated with that if I fail to do so, which still permeates to this
To this day.
right? Yeah. If I'm being really honest, it's probably a motivational, or maybe not motivational, but it's a contributing fear that gives me a little bit of motivational
Yeah.
um, emphasis to keep doing the things that I like doing or improve upon the things that I'm already doing, so on and so forth. Same thing with my health stuff.
Yeah. 2008-ish, you are in this small boutique agency doing what you do. And you're in this creative environment, but you're also feeling, okay, maybe I'm not as good as I anticipated or thought that I was. How long did you stay in that environment before you potentially looked for something else to move into?
I stayed there for, I don't remember the exact timeline, but let's call it a couple of years, probably no more than 2 years. And
All right.
then something else happened. My life changed because I got married back then too. So I went from, and then a whole new world when kind of happened after that. So I was living by myself in Detroit, and then I get married, and the place I lived in was way too small for 2 people. It was like 600 square feet, and it's
Okay.
great for one person, but not so great for 2 people. So So a couple of things happened. I was actually still working at that agency, but we moved a little bit further south in the city to just a larger place. And then we were there for only about 6 months. Because two things happened. First, the walls started leaking
Oh, wow.
whenever it would rain inside, which is really weird because it was like an 8-story building. And I think we were on the sixth floor, and somehow water would still leak even as we were 2 floors down.
How?
So there was that. Walls are leaking, and then the second part was that I get offered a job. I got another job offer, but this was all the way in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
So we move out of the city and we go to Ann Arbor. And even that only lasted like about a year because this was kind of a startup place, and those places don't necessarily always last, as that
Right.
business goes.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, so flash forward to being there. Even that changed the trajectory of my career a little bit because previous to taking this job at the startup, I had always worked in ad agencies or marketing
Yeah.
agencies doing like art direction, graphic design.
Yeah.
And then I pivoted to like UX design and designing interfaces and websites and doing digital design, which is something that was always, I had become interested in that. But then this was the first opportunity where I got to, work for a company and do that.
Right.
And that changed like the nature of my work and the trajectory of my career after that. But even being in Ann Arbor, like I said, we were only there for about a year, and then we moved back here to this side of town, and now I'm there in this hole since then. And that was, I guess, 12 years ago. I've been living in
Okay.
this current home for about 12 years.
Gotcha. And once you left Ann Arbor, I'm assuming again that's another pivot into another company design
Yeah.
wise.
Yeah. But actually, yeah, when I came back, there was something really ironic happened. Like I came back here for a job that was in Detroit, and then that one didn't work out. And then I was offered another job with a company that was in Ann Arbor, but I had already moved back to this side of town. So then I started commuting from like this area all the way over to Ann Arbor for a handful of years.
And that's
Which
at least a 45-minute drive at that point, right? Yeah.
yeah, it was quite a drive, 2 ways each day for a while.
Yeah. That's and for your dislike in transportation.
I know, I know, right? It sounds like a horrible idea in hindsight now that I say it out loud, but yeah, it's true. I did that drive for a handful of years, maybe 4, something like
Yeah.
that.
One of the things that I noticed in preparing your intro was the Harley Davidson stuff that you did. And
Yeah,
I had worked with Harley Davidson when I was doing my fashion shows and stuff like that.
yeah, I remember that.
But to see you be able to do something in terms of branding and helping to launch a product, that really was like, oh, wow, that's super cool. How did that come across your purview for that opportunity?
That was pitch work for one of the agencies that I worked at downtown. So they had, let's see, they were hosting an event. I want to say that this event was at like a music festival. Maybe it was a South by Southwest type of thing, or maybe it was an X Games type of thing. I don't really
Okay.
remember.
Yeah.
But they had this at the time, they had this tagline. The tagline was called United by Independence.
Hmm.
So it was this whole campaign around like being an independent person, an independent thinker, and how the bike can give you that independence. And like, so what is the brand around that campaign going to look like? And what's the mood, the feel, the sort of overall art direction, creative direction. So yeah, I worked on that. I did a bunch of like logos and concepts for what that tagline could look like. That came
Right.
in the form of like, actually a lot of that stuff now that I'm recalling, this is a while ago, I hand wrote a lot of that stuff, just with a
Okay.
marker, and I'd scan it in
Yeah.
and then bring it into Illustrator and sort of manipulate it. Yeah. And then like picking photographers to shoot scenes and stuff like that, like just doing kind of overall creative direction mapping and stuff. And they ended up using that for whatever part of the experience was.
Hmm.
Mm. And yeah, that's it. Just it's fun stuff, like kind of cool to get to work with a brand like that and pitch work like that. That seems so different than the work that I do nowadays, though.
Yeah.
Like it's like I lived a different,
Different life.
I've lived a different life. Yeah, back then working in agencies. Yeah, I just haven't done that in a while.
Right. With one of the things that you mentioned earlier was your health. And
Yeah.
I noticed that you have a different look of
Yeah.
from what you did when we first met. You had some of that early teen weight that had carried through for a while for you.
Oh
And
man.
I did notice once you were able to pivot into working for yourself, that became something that was a little bit more from a mindset standpoint you were conscious of. Because I did see you start at that point in time to start to work on that and notice that. But as we're here today, there's a drastic difference in terms of that perspective.
My overall look, yeah, for folks wondering what you're talking about, like when Rich and I first met, I was probably 80, 85, maybe 90 pounds heavier than what I'm walking around at these days.
Yeah.
And I was, it was kind of like remember what we were talking about earlier, like by the time that I hit 13,
Yeah.
I kind
Yeah.
of transitioned away from liking sports and into art. It was also the time that my body was changing. So I just gained weight,
Yeah.
continued to gain weight all the way through my 20s, and
Mhm.
then never really, really thought about it. No, I thought about it all the time. That's not true, but I never really addressed it until, again, around 2008-ish, when I moved into that new apartment.
Yeah.
That whole year, my life went through a whole lot of changes during that time. And I can tell you specifically what happened too. I think by the tail end, you and I were started to work for each other. I think I was becoming a little bit more aware of my body, wanting to make changes, maybe even going in that direction of making changes, eating better,
Yeah.
things like that. But when I moved into that apartment building, like I had mentioned, it was a new construction. And so I was one of the first people to move in there. So
Okay.
occupancy was pretty low. And there was, in the basement of this building, there was a new gym. And because occupancy was low, and I was one of the few folks that lived in there, barely anybody was in that gym.
Right.
And the biggest hurdle for me to start working out, or like, I would never even think of joining a gym because of the experience of like people looking at me or people judging me
Yeah.
for the way I look, and then also not knowing what I'm doing on this workout equipment. Those two hurdles were way too much for me to overcome. And so I
Yeah.
would have never joined a gym, so on and so forth. So anyways, this was the perfect opportunity. Like I was at an age where I had that job, and I kind of had this life where I would go to work in the morning, and then I would come home, and then like just kind of do that thing of like nothing, or like
Mm.
maybe sit around, eat dinner, watch television. This was like early social media, so it wasn't even like scrolling through Instagram or anything like that. That didn't even exist. But I had this sort of like flash forward of like, I'm unhappy with myself. I'm unhappy with the way that I look. I can continue to live this life, have this job, come home, do nothing, get up, do that, do the job again. It's just sort of do that over and over again. And I got sad. I got sick and feeling that way. So all of that stuff was enough to get me to go to the gym.
Mhm.
And the first time I remember going in there, I looked at around all the equipment and there was an elliptical machine. And I'm like, I bet I could figure that out. And sure enough, it's pretty easy. Get on it
Yeah.
and start moving. I did like 5 minutes, not much. But that was the first time that I had ever worked out in earnest. Like I had actually ever done any exercise in earnest.
Yeah.
And that was something. And the next night, come home, I come back and I do, 7 minutes on the elliptical. Then I just started compounding. I just got consistent. I would do my exercise every night. Then I got interested in like, what other exercises could I do? There's other equipment in this place. And then, I remember started reading Men's Health, and then Men's Health had an app. I remember downloading that app, and you could follow along on workouts. And it just started steamrolling. Like, as soon as I saw results, call it like 2 weeks of consistent working out, maybe I lost a couple pounds or whatever. And that was humongous. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
You can, I could just be consistent, like see changes. And so anyways, I got super interested in exercising. I got super interested in food and nutrition and eating better. So I changed my whole lifestyle. Like I don't even, and I don't think this was necessarily an indicator of good health, but I stopped eating meat for a while there. I was a pretty strict vegan, and then I went to vegetarian. Now I eat fish. I don't eat a whole lot of meat anymore. And even to this day, I'm still exercising. I'm still training 6 to 7 days a week. It's just part of life now. And it's all because of like that gym being free and available and nobody there, and me just being like just sick enough to want to make a change. So that's huge. Like those circumstances are huge for me.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful message for the audience as well, because us as creatives that are computer related creatives or artists or whatever, our life is basically sedentary.
Yeah,
Not a whole lot of movement going on.
you're right. It's sitting in this chair for 8-9+ hours a day. And you're right. It's quietly murdering you. So it's super important to get up and do some moving around,
Yeah.
get your exercise in. Yeah.
And even from that perspective too, thinking about, improving your health, which in turn improves your mental health as well. Because when you start eating better and you start exercising, the chemicals of the brain start moving and start interacting and start allowing for brain capacity to start functioning more optimally as it should. And I think that's just another good example of how a person can change a mental state as well as their own lifestyle. Just a simple act of, okay, here's an opportunity. I'm not going to be really bothered or feel judged or looked at because I have this, gym here where I live and there's
Yeah.
not really enough people in the building to occupy it completely. So let me just step into this and see what happens, see what it feels like.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
turns into a whole new lifestyle for you.
for sure. And then that's one piece of being, physically healthy, I think is one piece. And then there's the mental health, mental stability piece that I don't think I don't even want to call it obtained because it's hard to say that even to this day. Like
Okay.
I've mastered it, but I would say that I didn't even start to really address that piece of myself until 2020, 2021, something like that.
All right.
Pandemic era. That was when I first started seeing a therapist
Okay.
for the first time. So yeah, that was between those two events, like the getting healthy, so 2008 and 2020, that's a long time to,
Right.
deal with imposter syndrome, stuff that we had talked about previously, or even like me just dealing with my feelings in general.
Mm,
Like, like, going back to, we were talking about like my parents getting a divorce and how did I feel about that and what did it do to me?
right.
Um, the other thing that happened to me, and I think I get this from my parents, is that everything became like fine, quote unquote. Like,
Yeah.
this is fine. I can get through this. I can be tough. I can have the mental fortitude to navigate my way through this situation. So I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I kind of want to, I don't want to face my fears or bring, I don't even want to like let people know that I might even be afraid because that can seem like a weakness. These are all the things that I was feeling and I didn't really deal with until 5 years ago.
And was there a specific instance, Paul, or was it just a clarity of thought that made you decide to step in that direction?
Yeah, it was my wife, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, was, she's also not feeling well, like sort of not, wasn't in a good mental health space. And
Okay.
I'm also, because of the way that I'm moving through this world of, I think everything's fine. We don't have any problems. I don't have to address anything. So I wasn't able to give her the attention and support that she needed from her partner.
Yeah.
And because of all of that, because of that situation, she asked me to join her during her therapy sessions. She was already in
Okay.
therapy before me. So she asked me to join so that now between the three of us, myself, my wife, and her therapist, we could start to work on this situation. And we did.
Nice.
I mean,
Mm,
it took a couple of years.
yeah.
Like we were in therapy for a while. Yeah.
Well, I commend you for that. And the reason I say that is because of a lot of times when a relationship gets to that point and it- there's a realization of, hey, I'm not getting what I need from this relationship. I'm not
Yeah.
getting what I anticipated from this relationship anymore. And to make the choice to go and seek some help, go seek some outside advice. Then she also comes back to you and says, hey, we need to have a conversation. I'm doing this
Yeah.
and I would like for you to be a part of this. It,
Yeah.
because I imagine there's, you still have to have that love there, right? To even make that an option. There
Yeah.
has to be that connection that's still there in some form or fashion to make the connection of, hey, listen, I've been working on this. Now I need you to become a part of me working on this,
Yeah.
so that we can get to another level of our relationship and our marriage and life. And to be willing as a man to say, okay, I recognize you need this from me. And then giving it a go, giving it a shot, seeing how it can work out. Because there's many men out there in society that are like, no, I'm not going to somebody else to tell me what my problems are that doesn't even know me, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's not even that being the issue, it's an issue of somebody having a different perspective who can present it to you in a way that maybe allows you to look at it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of the same scenario if you're in an agency environment and you're art directing or creative directing, you got these different individuals that work with you who have their different skill sets, right? And if you got a problem on a project and you just can't figure it out as the lead, as the art director or the creative director, you're just like, I'm not seeing something here. And then you're present it to the team. You're like, hey, this is the problem that we're running up against that I'm seeing. Does anybody else have any perspective, or can you think of another way that we can turn this in a different direction? It's just that whole scenario of creative thinking and working with your team that now as a couple you've developed because you have an outside person coming in to help you work through these ideas and these thought processes and these feelings, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that same scenario as what you experience in a creative environment to deal with a client problem. Now it's just in a personal life problem. And many times as men, we have the aversion of stepping into that. Like, we don't want to be seen like that. We don't want to open up about that. And I know from my part of my journey, in terms of getting to a place of finding some healing, finding some relief of my internal struggles, I've always been somebody who I want to find that solution. I want
Yeah.
to figure this out, because if I can't figure it out, then I have to listen to that voice that's still saying, look, we can check out at any time here. You don't have to deal with this. Or you can just keep going.
Yeah.
And you can go off in this other direction and just let everything else go. So I've always had that wanting to figure things out. And for an individual like yourself and like me, who we step into that unknown world of allowing ourselves to be opened up and let somebody pull something out of us that we've been trying to hold on to and keep secret, keep everybody away from seeing it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
So again, I want to commend you for that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I think back then, it was much harder for me to open up.
Oh yeah.
No, I couldn't even the situation that you just described in yourself today, how you're looking for the solution and you're willing to open yourself up to other perspectives.
Yeah.
I feel like I was so closed off back then that I couldn't even entertain that there would be other perspectives other than my own.
Yeah.
I couldn't even fathom that my partner was so lonely and so unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? I couldn't even, it was hard for me to even think that. And yet I still joined. I still accepted her invitation to join them on her therapy sessions. Really, that was credit to her. I could see how important this was to her. And again, if I think about it from my perspective, I was the everything is fine person. So I didn't think this was a problem to begin with. And I was certainly guarded in the first couple of months. But now I'm almost like I invite uncomfortable situations or conversations. I think that's the good stuff. That's the important stuff, to have tricky conversations, or just to have open, honest conversations with people. Like, that's the fucking stuff of life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And I just don't think I would have been able to even express that 4 or 5 years ago.
Once you got somewhat comfortable with that, was there a point throughout that process that you're decided, okay, I'm going to do this on my own? Or was it still just a couple scenario for you?
Yeah, we never broke off and did our own sessions. We were in she had been in therapy before me for a number of years. And then we were in therapy together. It was just about 3 years.
Okay.
And I loved our therapist. Still miss, I still miss our therapist to this day. And there's like a statute of limitations. Actually, you end the session with a therapist. You're not supposed to be friends with them. I don't necessarily think we would ever become friends, but I got to appreciate the sessions with our therapist so much that I would one day love to become friends with this person.
Yeah.
So so after being in therapy and then like the thought of breaking off on my own, or like finding another therapist just didn't enter my mind. Plus, I felt like the whole point of therapy is to get to a space where you're feeling maybe more comfortable, more confident, or you can express yourself better. Whatever sort of change that you were looking for,
Yeah.
pre and post therapy, I felt like I had gotten there. Nowadays, now that I've been separated from like the regular cadence of talk therapy, I miss it. And now I'm at a point where I don't feel like I feel like I can move through this life and express myself, and I don't have anxiety, things like that. However, I feel like anyone, myself included, could benefit from having regular conversations with impartial
Yeah.
people. Again, just in the sense of like opening up yourself to us feelings, people, places, things like that. So I almost miss like just not having like a regular therapist anymore.
Right. For sure. I totally get it. Totally get it. When you're able to find a therapist that you really like, you really vibe with, that's willing to allow you to do the work versus telling you to do the work. That's it's a treasure, uh, and it's gold.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, that's what I had with my psychiatrist, um, and she retired right at right as the pandemic was starting to get going. 2020, I believe, or at the end of 2019, she retired. And for me, that was like, "Oh, crap. What do I do now?" Right?
Could really use a therapist right about
Yeah,
now.
at that point in time, because the world was just bonkers. But one of the things that I always appreciated about her was that she was willing to let me explore. She would if there was something that I had a question for, that I was dealing with something and she couldn't answer it, she would have an idea of somebody else who was working in a different modality that might help. And she would suggest and say, "Hey, why don't you take a look at this? Go talk to this person for a while. Let's see if we can get something set up with this other person, see what they can bring to the table." And I would do it. I would go, and if it didn't work, I could figure that out in a couple sessions just because I've been in therapy for so long. And then, there was other scenarios where I would ask stuff about something I was thinking of or something that I could feel. And this was something that I didn't find out and realize until later on in life, is that I'm an empath. So
Mm.
anybody that's familiar with empaths or empathy, you're able to feel and sense energy of people, environments, different things like that. And that really affects me. I never really realized that until later on in life. And when I did realize that, I started to be able to ask questions about things that I was sensing that she couldn't answer and explain.
Mm.
One of those things in particular is spirits. I can sense when spirits are around me or if somebody has passed on is near me or around me.
Wow.
And I would ask a question about that. And that was completely out of her purview of realm of understanding from a psychiatric standpoint and as a doctor.
Sure.
she could understand that, yes, that's real, but she didn't have the ability to speak on it in terms of what might help me. She was always willing to allow me to go outside of the office to other individuals see, to see if there was something else out there that could help me.
Yeah.
And then also too, in like 2007, she suggested that I reach out to a cognitive therapist, somebody that might be able to help me think through things and implement them a little bit more so in my life. And I've been with that cognitive therapist since then. When I went to see her, it was because of an engagement breakup that I was going through. And I was engaged for 2 years from 2005 to 2007.
Yeah.
And during that time period, I literally lost myself as a creative. I,
No kidding.
2007, I couldn't even recognize who I was. Like the creativity was not there. I didn't want to create. I couldn't create because of some of the relationship scenario didn't want me involved in certain things that I had been doing all along. One of those being fashion shows. Didn't want me doing fashion shows. And part of that was just an insecurity of working with models and different things like that.
Okay.
But losing that ability to be free to do those things started pushing who I was down further and further. And sometimes when I would go to start seeing this cognitive therapist, I was so broke at that point. I could barely get to her office some days.
Oh man.
So I would leave the house knowing I've got to go and sit down and talk with her. And the anxiety would ramp up so bad. Like I'd get halfway there and be like, I can't come. I'm not going to be able to do it. And she'd be, okay, that's fine. We'll set it at the same time next week and I'll see you then. And so it was, again, another therapist who was understood what was going on and understood that just the simple fact that I got in the car and attempted to go there, that was enough for that day.
Yeah.
And her being open and allowing me to see that and recognize that it was okay, even if I got there, got into the office, sat down on the couch and was like, I can't do this. I got to leave. She's like, okay, I'll see you next week. So
That's
one of the things,
really important for you
oh,
at the time.
very much so, very much so. And that's one of the things where, again, commending you on being an advocate to participate and, engage in that way. I think that's so important for the creative community to hear rather, that there is an opportunity to heal.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you just have to be willing to take that step.
That's true. Yeah, I always underestimate that, but you're exactly right. Just taking the step or shifting your perspective, your thinking a little bit. That's, I know, easier said than done, but
Right.
a pretty important shift to make if you want to.
For sure. For sure. And, from my perspective too, leading up to this conversation, it was a bit exciting for me because I remember our interactions back when we were connected a lot more than what we have been over the last decade.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated it. And it was interesting through the conversation so far when you would bring up that imposter syndrome. And in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, Paul. Because I would just go back in time and remember, I'd come to you and be like, hey, this is what I've got. We need to, turn this into some vector art. And you'd do some things right there while I was watching. If it wasn't too detailed, things that were detailed, you're like, I'm going to have to work on this some more, come back in a few days or whatever.
Yeah.
But you were always asking me, Is this okay? Is this what you want? Is this what you're looking for?" Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'd be sitting there, I would say, "Paul, this is what I need. I'm trying to get to here and I can't get there." He'd be like, "All right, well, let's do this." And I'd be like, "Paul, you're a fucking genius. That's exactly what I needed." So it's always been interesting to see that imposter side of you that rises up. It's like, I don't know for sure that I'm good enough to be doing this, but yet I'm willing to do it. And I've always been that person on the other side of it of, bro, you're a genius. Like what you do is good.
Yeah, isn't it funny how someone's perception and reality is
Oh
two
yeah.
different things, right? Like you had this perception of me in a certain way, but in reality, internally, I have like diarrhea and I can't, I can't function or whatever. And
Yeah.
say like when we were working together, when we first met each other, and then when you told me about your suicide attempt, I didn't know that that was going on during that time.
Yeah.
My perception of you at that time was like you were like slick as hell. You're this guy. You're this guy who's working with all these really cool brands. You're hanging out with like Kid Rock and his folks. You're doing work for like Bacardi and
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolute and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, my perception view is like Rich is the shit. He's working on all this cool stuff, but meanwhile, you're like, you're in agony, or,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, we never knew the truth about each other until
For sure.
January 20th, 2026. Many,
It's
many, 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 many years later.
yeah. It's amazing that that's the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, a lot of times it's those perceived notions that keep us from actually learning the true reality of things.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times is what the actual detriment to most creatives is that they're not inquisitive enough to seek more or learn more or try and look at things in a different way. But
Yeah.
I think that's why these conversations that I've been trying to have with individuals that I know, individuals that I don't know, that just meet for the first time on a call like this, it's to raise the volume on that perspective that, hey, we all deal with certain things that are either mental or just life experiences that are not the best. And sometimes we get through them. Others we struggle all the way through them. But to have a conversation where we can share that perspective with other creatives and have them have the opportunity to hear this, I think that's what allows for things to start opening up a little bit more.
I couldn't agree anymore. Yeah. You're doing a great thing by hosting this podcast, having these conversations. Like I was just saying earlier, like this is really the important stuff. These types of conversations, opening up, truly expressing yourself, even maybe even be willing to be a little bit vulnerable
Yeah,
in the process
exactly.
too. I think that is so important for maybe folks who need to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great place for us to be able to close out today, Paul. One of the
Like,
things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these episodes, is to always listen to your heart, but as well be kind to your mind.
it's good. I like that.